Okay. Well, hello to all of our panelists. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Very
Fantastic,
good.
Kalia. Fantastic.
Very good. We have people from everywhere. So I know Rich and I are in Denver, Colorado today. Mike is on the East Coast out of Boston, Massachusetts. Meredith and Lisa, where are you both again?
New York for me.
Okay.
And I'm in the New York metropolitan area, so Connecticut, just a little north of the city.
Nice. Next time we need to get somebody on the West Coast just so we can cover all of our bases.
If you want to send me to LA, I'll go out there just to take one for the team.
That's it. Yes. Especially in the winter.
San Diego,
It's
Rich.
easier.
San Diego.
Oh, San Diego, yeah, San Diego. What am
It's
I
better.
thinking?
I mean, if you're gonna get out there, go to San Diego.
That's right.
I appreciate being kept in check on that. So thank you.
Nice.
The willingness to sacrifice for the benefit of the team there, you know?
It's what you need to do sometimes. If I got to go to San Diego and take one, I guess I'll do it.
It's
Might
a
have to do it.
generosity of spirit, really. It's just a generosity of spirit there.
Nice. Yeah. Stand by for your invite there, Rich.
Right.
Hang tight.
I will hold my breath.
That's it. All right. Well, I think we are just about ready to get everything started. I would like to say a big hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Today's session is fairy tales and horror stories, what technology can and cannot solve for you in legal. My name is Kalia Garrido. I head up strategic marketing and events here at Hike2. And if you don't already know us, Hike2 is an IP-enabled boutique services firm, and we specialize in the legal sector. Our primary focus is on providing innovation solutions in legal, risk, and compliance for highly regulated industries. But in addition to the technology services that we provide, we also host legal operations conversations about a variety of topics that affect both corporate legal ops professionals and large law firms. For a full list of our upcoming events or to learn more about our legal ops innovation practice, please visit us at hike2.com. Before we get going with our conversation today, a little bit of housekeeping. This is a webinar, of course, so your cameras and microphones are off, but we welcome questions and conversation. So you can do this in a few different ways. You can use the chat and kind of chat amongst yourselves. We, as the panelists, will be able to see it as well. We can use the Q&A feature that's been turned on as well. And if you'd prefer to hold your question to the end of the session, then we'll save a little bit of time to go through some questions then as well. So without further ado, allow me to make some introductions for my esteemed guests. And I'm going to start with Lisa Olney. She is the founder and principal of Brook Street Strategies, LLC, which is a boutique agency that offers fractional CMO services and strategic marketing and business development consulting to the legal industry. We also have Meredith Gordon. Meredith is managing counsel at LivePerson, which is an industry leader in conversational AI. Meredith is a proven leader with extensive experience in-house at major NYC law firms, and she's been running legal ops programs that position legal departments to effectively scale as their businesses grow. We also have Rich Bracken joining us today. Rich has built an impressive career combining his experience as an award-winning salesperson, marketer, and client services expert with his passion for speaking, consulting, and coaching. And he has a specific background in business development for an international law firm of over 350 attorneys. Last but not least is my colleague, Mike Anastasides. Mike is the Director of Legal Solutions here at Hike2. As a strategic leader with many years of practical experience in the legal vertical, Mike excels at leading high-performing teams to drive revenue growth and build customer relationships. And so, Mike, I'd love to pass the mic to Mike. The floor is yours.
Kalia, I'm blushing. I'm embarrassed about you. This fabulous. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you passing the mic to Mike. Thanks, everyone. Welcome. This is awesome. Really excited. We got a great panel, great guests lined up. Maybe I'll sort of double down on some of what Kaylee was saying. We really want this to be an interactive session. So there is a Q&A. There is Q&A functionality you all have access to. Please go ahead and ask any questions you have in Q&A. We'll certainly monitor that, and we'll ask those questions right away to our panel. And since we've done our introductions here, let's get right into it. We've got a series of questions for our panelists. We're going to kick this off with Lisa. Lisa, here we are, fairy tales, horror stories, talking to corporate legal people, to people at law firms. I want to ask you first, if it's okay. If you were going to advise a law firm when it comes to investing in technology, what advice would you give?
Sure. So thanks for the question, Mike, and thanks for having me. I would say four things. And just so the audience knows my perspective, I'm now consulting externally, but I've been in-house at 4 different law firms. And so most of what I'm talking about is drawn from those experiences of actually being on the ground in your shoes, having to roll out technology and make selections. So the first thing I would say is you need to really start by defining the problem. It's really important to see what's out there, to keep an eye on all of the new technologies that are coming out, because sometimes you don't know what's even possible until you learn that. But you definitely want to be guided by what problem or challenge are you looking to solve internally. That's going to keep you from getting distracted by a term you'll probably hear a couple times today, but by the shiny new toys out there, to really focus on how do you make an impact at the firm you're at. And you need to be thinking about how you're going to solve that problem. The second thing I would say is you need to think really carefully about whether the solution is technology, process, or both. So if your challenge is that nobody will share information and you bring in a technology that is going to give them an easier way to submit information, that might help. It's making it a little easier. But if you haven't addressed the challenge of how to incentivize people to share, then that's really just going to be an easier way for no one to do what you ask them to do. So you really want to step back and think through how are you going to incentivize the right behavior, build out the processes behind the scenes so that you've got kind of a stable foundation for the technology to sit on. The third thing I would always advise is to talk to other users. So it's all well and good to hear from the technology vendor, and they've got a great perspective on, a broad swath of clients and what they've seen work. But asking to speak to someone, ideally at a firm like yours, although it doesn't have to be, to see what's working in practice. What did they think would be the best feature, but it turns out that didn't work at their firm? What did they not see coming that's actually been transformational? That can really give you examples of how to go about it at your firm that are going to be very beneficial. And then the last thing I would say is think very carefully about what systems you already have in place. So it's not to say that you can't end up with systems that have parallel sources of data. Sometimes the benefits outweigh the downsides and it's still worth doing. But you don't want to have that happen by accident, where you're bringing on a CRM system that doesn't talk to your client matter database or doesn't talk to your experience database. You need to think about what's going to be what I've heard referred to as the essential source of truth. Like, where are you going to keep the best data, and how are you going to make sure everybody knows that and that your systems either talk to each other or at least you're cognizant of where they don't and you can manage for that difficulty.
Terrific. Thanks, Lisa. That comprehensive and point by point. Meredith, I'm going to maybe switch over to you if it's okay, talking about technology adoption and maybe switching from law firms over to corporate legal. So Meredith, where have you seen corporate legal departments succeed when it comes to getting a solution adopted?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, just hi, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be on this panel with everybody, and excited to be interacting with our audience. I also just want to throw out there, I'm always glad to make connections on LinkedIn with folks interested in these topics. So maybe at some point I'll throw my link in the chat, or you can just find me on LinkedIn. I'm Meredith Gordon at LivePerson. And the other thing I want to kind of preface my comments with is, so I'm managing counsel at LivePerson now. Prior to joining LivePerson, I spent about 11 or 12 years at Salesforce. So obviously I have a lot of experience with that particular tool and sort of that ecosystem. But I really want to be clear, sort of my comments here are very much tool agnostic. I think no matter what tool or system you're using, a lot of these same rules and practices can apply. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously oftentimes sort of the goals of an in-house legal department might be a little different from the goals specifically of a law firm, right? There's different types of data you're trying to track. There's different types of processes you're trying to automate. But fundamentally, I think a lot of the rules are the same, right? It's really, you know, in real estate, it's location, location, location. I think in legal tech, it's preparation, 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 right? So it's identifying what are your requirements really, really clearly. What's the end goal? What does success look like? Before you start, you know, to Lisa's point, sort of looking at all the shiny new toys, which can be exciting and a little distracting and a little confusing. Have a really, really clear list of what your requirements are, you know, sort of in order of priority. What are the absolute must-haves? What are the, you know, nice to haves, but we could live without? What are the sort of bonus that, gee, if it gets thrown in for free, cool, but if we don't get it, it doesn't really matter. But, you know, beyond just preparing your requirements, you need to prepare your data and your people. So, you know, if you get a great tool for processing data, whether it's contractual data, you know, your contractual obligations or your matter data, right? Or your, you know, and any sort of data that you're looking to manage. If your data is a mess and you can't sort of get it into the system and get it into the tool working properly, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to waste time. You're going to end up, you know, particularly if it's a subscription service, paying for months and months of use of a tool that you can't really use. So prepare your requirements, prepare your data, prepare your people, right? Really go through sort of a full-on change management process. Talk to people about what are the pain points that maybe you're aware of, maybe you're not aware of. You know, what are the sort of low-hanging fruit processes or tasks that can be automated that people would love to have taken off of their plates. You know, and I think there's often a lot of sort of anxiety and fear about automation, about AI in particular. You know, people think, oh, AI is coming for our jobs. I think if it's handled properly and really presented as, listen, AI is not coming for your job. AI is coming for the boring, annoying, repetitive parts of your job, where you're sitting there saying, did I really go to school for this? Like, is this, you know, it's coming for those things that you don't want to spend your time doing. And that frankly, as a corporation, you don't want to have your lawyers doing, right? The legal team is an expensive and limited resource, and it should be deployed on sort of the highest return on investment activities. So I think if you can kind of, you know, prepare your requirements, prepare your data, and prepare your people, and really get that information from them, make sure that they understand they're a part of this process. They're supposed to be benefiting from this process. It makes no sense to kind of go through a whole exercise of selecting a tool, implementing a tool, rolling out a tool, and then hearing from your people that say, great, but this tool doesn't fix the biggest problem that we had or the biggest pain point that we had. So I think those are some of the really important steps, you know. And then maybe just as a kind of bonus point, I think having the ability to trial a tool for free using your own data in a secure way is huge, right? Because prefab demos look great. They look like they're magic for a reason, right? They're pre-prepared and they're designed to look perfect. But being able to actually trial a tool with your own data, with your own sort of stuff, to use a technical term, and see how it works for you before you kind of go all in on it, I think can be really valuable. And frankly, can also, I think, be really valuable for the vendor if you're comfortable sharing that feedback, good or bad, saying it worked great in this area, but you know what we were expecting in this area didn't happen. That might be an opportunity for the vendor to take that back and say, oh, we can make that better if we just tweak this one thing or we just adjust this one thing. You know, it's not a big lift, but it has a big sort of positive impact on you as a customer and potentially on a lot of their other customers as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Meredith. Rich, I'm going to pull this over to you now, and if you could maybe bring this all together. You know, we've heard from Meredith, we've heard from Lisa. Law firms, corporate legal departments, they're evaluating solutions. What are maybe one or two best practices they should consider employing to choose the correct solution?
Yeah, and first of all, I wouldn't be a panel if I didn't start off by saying, you know, what they said. So one, you know, my background is similar to Lisa's in the sense that I spent several years at 3 different law firms. I'm now in a very unique position where I'm still consulting law firms, but I'm also consulting with corporate legal teams and then also legal operations executives. So I sit in this weird legal whisperer space. So a lot of what I'm going to share today is tied to these conversations. And like Meredith too, I'm a big LinkedIn nerd. So if you want to share my LinkedIn profile, you're happy to do it. Happy to connect with anybody on this as well. So one, I think Meredith touched on this too, is the idea of understanding what the problem is, because you can go spend whatever money on whatever shiny tool that you want to spend on. But if you don't get consensus on what the problem that you're trying to solve is, it doesn't matter. You're throwing technology at the wrong thing. And so what I think needs to happen, especially within law firms, as we've looked at these types of processes in improving the technology space, is understanding where are we seeing the highest amount of inefficiency? Where are things getting bogged down? Where are we spending too much time? Because a lot of times it winds up being the squeakiest wheel thing. Well, I want this. And if they make enough noise, they get their thing. And then everybody that actually has the problem, that maybe it's a cumulative effect of time wasted, are left in the dark, from a technology standpoint, literally, because they're not serving the needs of those individuals. So it may be a user that doesn't use the technology a whole lot, but wants the fancy, cool thing because that's what they think they need to do to keep up with the competition. That's what they think they need to do to recruit more efficiently. But looking at the whole operations of the entire firm or the entire legal department within a corporation, and understanding, like, to really dive in, almost do like a Kaizen, dive in and hardcore and figure out where your inefficiencies are. Because a lot of times we defer to, oh, it's timekeeping, or it's billing, or it's this, or it's file management. But it could just be something, something very simple, but those little tasks that add up every single day could wind up being the biggest leak of problematic cost spend, time spend, resource spend, and frustration, frankly. And at the end of the day too, and I don't mean to put the fear of anarchy into anybody's mind, but if you took all of the operations people and all the business professionals within a law firm, and they just said, you know what, to heck with it, if you're not going to help us get caught up technologically, we're done. All of a sudden, you've got a big problem on your hands. Or they may be looking to a different firm that is looking to serve those needs, and you could be losing out on a lot of talent that, if you just paid attention to what the bottom line of the inefficiencies, the true inefficiencies of a firm or a team, you could solve that problem. You could save a lot of headache by just addressing the issues that your firm, your team, your company needs to take care of first.
Lisa, I want to pass it over to you. We've talked about technology and obviously selecting a great technology solution. It's an important step in the process. But what are some of the do's and don'ts you'd suggest when it comes time to deploying that solution?
Yeah, I think, this is really, when we're thinking about the title for this program, those horror stories, this is where they really tend to come into play, because you've done all the hard work. You've picked what really is just the perfect technology for your firm. And where, if it's going to fall apart, it tends to fall apart is in the rollout. So what I would suggest, and some of this is things I've learned by doing it the right way, others is things I've learned by either doing or being a part of it being done the wrong way. So I'll give you from both sides of the aisle there. The first is you really need to think about how to sell this. So, using the skills, and I'm talking in this instance more to the legal marketers on the call, but I think anyone can think through this lens. The same type of lens that you're thinking about when you sell a product or a service externally, you need to bring some of that thought process internally. How are you going to build excitement? How are you going to find the people who can influence whether this is accepted or not? And how are you going to talk to people in a way that they understand what's in it for me? So it's all well and good to say that, we need you to be firm-minded, and we need you to enter all your data into a CRM system so that we know what's going on in marketing and we can support you. And this is about you doing the right thing for the firm. And with some attorneys, that will work. But there are others where you're going to have to get really granular about what's in it for me. So just to give you an example from real life, when I've had to roll out CRM systems and I do run into that person that's reluctant to share data, you need to put yourself in their shoes. And what they're worried about is losing the credit, losing the connection to that client. So for those people, I don't talk about being firm-minded and doing the right thing. And I certainly don't talk about making marketing's life easier. What I talk about to them is you need to mark your territory. If this is a person, a client, or a prospect that is important to you, and no one at this firm knows you're talking to them, how do you think you're going to prevent someone else from selling to the same prospect? How are you going to show that you're the one with a strong relationship? This is your opportunity to mark your territory and make sure that when that credit dispute comes up down the line, that you have something to show. And that's what resonates with them. So think about, for each, maybe not each individual, but certainly each population of people, how to translate it into what's in it for them. You need to look to build excitement and also learn. So think about doing a pilot. Law firms are they're big on pilots. It's an opportunity to both test it out and actually learn from users what's working and what's not in a safe space where nobody's going to be too put out if it's not working perfectly because they know they're part of it. But the other side of that is you're building buy-in. So somebody who's participating in a pilot starts to feel a sense of ownership over the successful rollout. And if you can pick the right combination of people who will both give you data to make your product more customized and better, but also talk to people, they're going to go out there and say, you know what, I helped make this tool so much better. You should really give it a shot. Or they're going to talk positively, or at least not be skeptics who are pushing back against your efforts. That's huge. The third thing is communicate. You're going to have to think about when the right time to let the firm know this is going on, how you're going to communicate, whether that's emails, that's demos at practice group meetings, that's a video, that's FAQs. Think about all the different communication channels that you have open to you, and think about your firm's culture and what's going to resonate best. And you may need to do all of them. It may be that, you're going to get to different people in different ways, but you need to be what feels like over communicating about the benefits, the how-tos, who to call if you have a problem. If somebody goes in and they get frustrated, you don't want them to just wash their hands of it, which is a very common reaction with busy attorneys. You need to give them an easy way to get help and get back on track. And then the final thing I would say, kind of similar to the pilot, is think about doing focus groups. So this is going to make more sense with some technologies than others. But for instance, when I rolled out the first client portal at one of the firms that I was a CMO at, we really needed to get some actual feedback from the users about what they needed. So we had our sense of what we thought they needed, but we ran a series of focus groups and we got some really great data and some things that we didn't think about by having a very wide swath of roles, admins up to senior partners in those meetings. So I would suggest that as well.
If I can add just two super quick things. One, and Lisa, I completely agree with everything you're saying. And I think the accuracy of what you said triggered some PTSD horror stories for me. So I wanted to just hit two quick points. One, for anybody within a law firm, it's quick to say, let's just go get the early adopters, the tech savvy people. I want you to go find that person in your firm that is still staring at the fax machine. Bring them into the pilot and let them test it too, because there's nothing worse than having a top-heavy, tech-savvy group of attorneys that love it, and you have a vast majority of people that just don't get it or don't want to buy in, or they think, well, they're the tech people, they're going to get it quicker than I am. This is a longer road. Go find the fax machine person. And every firm I've worked in or have consulted has that person, and they raise their hand when asked so. So it's not, you're not aging anybody, you're not insulting anybody by doing that. From a technology provider standpoint, I've heard more times than not in the last 6 months alone about the process of sale. So if you sell to a firm or you sell to a company, keep that person involved in the onboarding and keep that person involved in the first couple of weeks or the first month or two of implementation, because there is nothing worse. I've heard more users and buyers say this. There's nothing worse than being sold by person one, and then they're gone on to the next sale as onboarding and rollout is happening. Or they're like, well, I'll be engaged, and they're maybe checking their email once or twice a week. So for those tech vendors, keep your process as cohesive as possible and make sure that your buyers, because there's nothing worse than selling a client, they roll it out, and then they hate what you did because they don't get it and they don't have the white glove service that you promised them on the front end. Sorry, yeah, rant, PTSD, done.
I would just add to that, I think that's one of the reasons I think doing sort of a free trial period with your own demo is a great opportunity to do that, right? Because you're still engaged with the seller, from the technology vendor, you're still working with them. It's sort of this opportunity to say, all right, let's give this a try, obviously in a secure sort of environment if you're going to use your own data or using sort of your own, dummy data with PII stripped out, whatever it is. But really kind of trialing it while you still have that connection with the person who's frankly still really incentivized to try to make you happy because you haven't actually signed on the dotted line yet, right? I mean, that's sort of the window where as the buyer, you kind of have the most leverage. So I think it's really behooves you as a buyer to sort of make sure that you're testing all that stuff out and you're checking all that stuff. And I would just add, Rich, I loved what you said about kind of bringing along the least sort of tech comfortable or tech savvy person. And I would also maybe even expand that to say, think about the people who aren't necessarily just sort of anti-tech entirely, but maybe who've been using whatever technology, process tools you have in place currently sort of for the longest, right? So newest members of the firm, newest members of the company aren't, fully entrenched in whatever currently exists, maybe are fine picking up something new, trying something different. Folks who've been there quite a long time who are, sort of, this is the way we do it, this is the way we've always done it, so this is the way we will continue to do it, maybe a harder sell. So those might also be a really good audience to try to choose from in terms of your pilot or your free trial sort of period, and get their feedback, particularly in the context of how different is this from the way that we're doing it now? Is it better? Is it easier? Is it addressing some of the pain points? And if it's not, what is it not addressing? What do we not know about, and sort of get that information that way.
Yeah, those are such great points. And I think like the commonality that you're hearing from Rich and Meredith and from me is find your skeptics and see how you can win them over. So they may be the, person who doesn't like tech, or the person who is so comfortable with what they had that you are really upsetting their life. Or it could just be someone who, we all know those people. They are influential and they tend to be negative and they like to talk. So figure out what it looks like at your firm, but see if you can bring some or all of those skeptics into the fold and use that rollout process to actually get some buy-in, as well as some really valuable data about how you should move forward.
I love that skeptics theme, Lisa. We're gonna stick with that, and I'm gonna move this over to Rich, and talk maybe about people potentially skeptical of artificial intelligence. And when I heard a quote from you and I wrote it down. I'm going to ask you if you could just maybe give a little bit more. But it's those that fear AI will be left behind. Those that work with it will thrive. Do you mind maybe, Rich, just expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I was laughing. I think anybody else that's not on camera, that's in our audience, when you hear the words "go find your skeptic in a law firm," like there's probably some head nods and some giggles. But when we think about AI, and I think Lisa said it earlier, that there's been this mentality of like AI is coming to get us, AI is coming to get our jobs, and it's been this storm on the horizon for so long, and now it's upon us and it's past us. So those people that have feared it and are going to continue to fear it, it's here, and you're going to need to use it. And what I meant by that quote is I've heard, I heard a great presentation on AI. Like Damian Reel is a phenomenal speaker in this space on legal AI, and he was talking about his relationship with a legal operations executive at a large company, and he asked, how many of these law firms are actually using AI effectively and efficiently, and what is the benefit to doing so for you? And this person replied and said, basically, here's the deal. The historical model, it rewards slowness. It rewards depth. Yes, you want to make sure you're thorough, but at the same time, like, are you really truly moving as fast as you can to close a matter, to wrap up a case? The billable hour may keep you honest here, because a lot of times attorneys or law firms, for better or for worse, are going to look at the dollar, and if they can build in extra hours, if they can drag out the case a little bit more. I'm not saying all firms are like this, but there are some bad actors in the marketplace. What AI does is it basically it's the corporate team's dream, because it's keeping costs low when used appropriately. It's moving matters along quicker, and it's getting things done in a more efficient, thorough way. And there were examples that he shared that were phenomenal, like blew my mind. It was one of the first presentations, and definitely the only one on AI that I've actually leaned on my table listening to what he was saying. He was talking about using AI to determine the probability of effectiveness in litigation. He was talking about using AI to go back through depositions and find inconsistencies. He was talking about going in and really streamlining the matters as quickly as possible. And he asked his client, if you had a firm that was just whipping through matters for you and getting them done quicker and lower cost, what problem does that cause for anybody? He said, I have more work to dole out than I know what to do with. I've talked with several GCs in the last week that are sitting on 75 to 100 matters a piece on a team of a couple hundred. So there's plenty of work to go around. So if the firms that can figure out how to leverage AI and get things done quicker, obviously accurately, and making sure that they're doing the work correctly. But if you're getting it done quicker, and you're doing it lower cost, you don't think your client's going to fall in love with that process? I've yet to meet a GC or a legal operations executive that's like, no, we want to keep paying the high bills. We want to keep waiting to see when this matter is going to close. They want things done quickly and efficiently. Think about yourself as a consumer. If you are waiting on something like that, do you want to keep waiting on something that's a really big deal to drag out and get more and more expensive as it goes? Or do you want somebody to do something thoroughly, efficiently, and low cost? So those firms that adopt AI, use it correctly, and work towards a goal with their clients are going to thrive. Those are going to sit around and wait on somebody to find faults in AI so they can move away from it and say, hey, I told you so, are going to be left behind. And you're going to see some firms start folding and merging into others because they don't want to catch up with the technology.
Meredith, Rich used some terms there, efficiently, low cost, quickly. Obviously Gen AI can be used to make firms, corporate legal departments, attorneys more efficient. It's not magic though. That's for sure. I think we could all agree to that. Would you mind sharing an example, or maybe an example or two, of where you've seen Gen AI help make teams, more productive?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before I kind of delve into the Gen AI, I do want to clarify that, there's been a lot of attention, a lot of media attention on Gen AI. I personally think part of the reason it's gotten sort of so much attention and so much hype lately is it kind of combines two things, particularly sort of the free Chat GPT model, that it's free, or it seems to be free, and it seems to be sort of magical and human. I do think as we move forward, particularly with sort of enterprise level Gen AI, there's the realization that it can actually be relatively sort of expensive or resource heavy to use Gen AI in particular, as opposed to sort of standard sort of predictive non-generative AI versus standard sort of automation. And it is predictive, right? It's a predictive model. It's not actually a human. It gives the impression of being sort of a really smart person, but it's predicting what's most likely. And so I think as those sort of realizations come to people, that there's, beyond the hype and the excitement, there is this recognition that sort of Gen AI is a tool, like sort of predictive modeling AI is a tool, like standard programming is a tool, and automation is a tool, and all of these tools can be really useful and can help us operate more efficiently and more effectively. But we need to recognize that they are tools and they are not magic, and they're also, generally speaking, at the enterprise level, not free. So there's some sort of cost benefit analysis, and I think with sort of standard programming, a very kind of if X then Y kind of standardized programming, as opposed to things like machine learning, large language models, which are more kind of, you feed them giant quantities of data and they start to make their own predictions and their own kind of guesses as to like what the Y should be following an X, as compared with generative AI, which is that plus the idea that it's creating some kind of content. Right. I think there's huge opportunities for efficiency gains, for effectiveness gains, and also for sort of employee satisfaction gains. Right. I really do think, going back to, nobody sort of, when they were thinking about their career path, I think sat there and said, what I really want to do all day long is boring, repetitive, sort of high volume, low complexity tasks. I mean, maybe there are folks who want to do that. And if so, that's awesome. And I would love to find some of those folks. But most of the people I work with, are really interested in sort of the higher complexity, more interesting, more challenging work, and would love to find, tools and automation to make that sort of repetitive stuff go faster or go away, frankly. And I think, when it comes to kind of automation, we look a lot at sort of workflow intelligence, right? Can we use, say, a ticketing system to figure out, based on data that's pulled, which team member or which team the request should go to, right? Can we do more with self-serve automation? Can we build sort of a series of knowledge articles and bots that kind of speak to those knowledge articles and respond to questions? I think with respect to generative AI, I like to think of it, and I think I read this somewhere, so I would love to give credit to whoever it was but I'm not sure. So this was not my original idea, but I read somewhere someone talking about treating generative AI as sort of like when you're working with a first-year associate or a summer associate at a law firm, and you ask them to write sort of a first draft of a memo or a brief or some sort of content. Most experienced lawyers or partners would probably not take that first draft and send it right out to a client or submit it to a court, right? You would look it over, you would edit it, you would critique it, you would check it, you would shepherdize it, you would, make sure that sort of it looks the way you want it to look. But fundamentally, and this is a partner I used to work with used to say, it's easier to start with the phone book and mark it up than it is to start with a blank page. And I really think of Gen AI like that. It's sort of providing you, you could go online and search for a template. There's plenty of resources. You could go into your own internal banks and try to find a template, or you could, potentially use Gen AI, again, suggesting, you probably want to use an enterprise level one, not put any confidential or proprietary information into it. That's the sort of standard lawyer disclaimer, I think, for Gen AI. But, it's another way to kind of get a starting point and get something that you can work with, and you can then bring your expertise and your human judgment and intelligence and level of understanding to a kind of, starting point. I think where people get into trouble is where they think, they forget that it is a predictive model, that it is guessing based on a lot of data. So, it's an educated guess or an informed guess, but it's guessing about what the right answer might be or what the right words might be to use. And it's great to start with a guess. You can't, I think people get into trouble when they rely on that guess and sort of fall for the facade or the mirage of, this is a magical person who knows all the answers to everything because they've been fed, all of the information from the whole internet or whatever the data set is.
Lisa, Meredith, and Rich have had their say when it comes to AI, and we can't leave you out of this. I have another quote. I've heard you say in the past that AI is not a threat, but an opportunity for the legal industry. Maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think Meredith and Rich both made some great points that I agree with. I love this model, and Meredith mentioned this in one of our prep sessions, and I've been thinking about it ever since, about the generative AI as a first-year associate, as a junior level marketer. It's a starting point. I think it's an opportunity if we use it that way. So, I think when I looked at the list of participants for this, we have a really wide range of experience levels, which is great for the leaders on the call. And I saw a number of CMOs, to be thinking now about the fact that this probably will change the staffing look of your departments. And so we have a choice to either wait until that happens to us, because there's pushback on size of department, because there are things like generative AI that can help with low-level tasks, or to be part of the conversation about what that should look like. I don't think many of us go into this looking for those rote, boring tasks. I know I spent a lot of time doing that when I was a marketing coordinator, spreadsheets and other things that didn't require much of my brain. And the more senior you get, the more you're paid for your judgment and not for your ability to input stuff into spreadsheets or the equivalent. And that's, we may get there one day. It's possible there's a Terminator future out there and it happens, but where we are right now with generative AI, it needs a lot of polish and it needs a lot of input. And it also needs really smart people with good judgment and a lot of experience to give it the right prompts to get the right answers. And so that's kind of the biggest difference I see with people who've leaned in on this. I'm going to benchmark. I'm at best an advanced beginner. I'm still really learning this, but when I talk to colleagues who've either invested more time or they're just, more naturally inclined to these things and look at the way they're using generative AI, I'll give you an example. There's a woman I'm collaborating with on a project who comes up with these programs for law firms that are so strategic, really based on data. They take a ton of time and they're quite simply brilliant. And she was telling me how she has trained a chat GPT with her voice and her thought process. And she was able to produce a program plan for a law firm in 10 hours instead of 40 hours. So 10 hours is a lot of time. She still had to take that, really put it through the lens, polish it, be just as strategic and thoughtful, and bring the data to play as she always had, But she can now do that for 4 firms in the time it took her to do it for one, because she was able to invest the time and really be thoughtful about how she used a GPT in that instance. So I think that it always goes back to highest and best use. How do you want yourself and those in your department to be using their time? And I think that's where we need to just be very thoughtful about how we're using ChatGPT to generate, a first draft of a press release or a first draft of a practice script description is very different than a strategic plan for your firm, where you really need to understand the ins and outs of your culture and your goals and your business data. But blank sheets are hard, to Meredith's point about the phone book. I think if you can use this as a way to just take you that much further, and some of this, again, is about the lens you look at the world through. So if other people are seeing this as something that's coming, it doesn't do you much good to be that skeptic that we were talking about. You can be careful and thoughtful and try things out. And you can also push back to say, that's not a good use of generative AI, but this is. But I think you want to be part of driving those conversations and making sure you land in a place that feels right for you and your team.
Yeah, and
Meredith,
if I could add one thing
go ahead,
based off
Rich,
of what
please.
Lisa said.
Yes,
The one thing that I think is fantastic in what you said there, Lisa, and I agree with both of y'all on this. But the one thing that you said is that you, as a user, have to know what you're doing. Yeah. And so let's back up also and forget that while AI is pushing us towards the Terminator age, we're still humans. And so we still have to communicate. We still have to innovate. We still have to have empathy when we're engaging our clients. I've seen a dramatic uptick in executive presence coaching for my business with law firms, with attorneys, with business development and marketing teams, because you can go create the best draft of an article. You can go create a great PowerPoint now in AI. But if you can't stand up there and present or communicate an idea, or if you're an attorney coming back to your client and you don't have empathy, and you don't have the ability to convey an idea or innovate. Think about how many times we just sit around and talk as people and innovate. And yes, AI is reactive. It is basing a lot of things on data. And so, there's some things around probability and whatnot, but when you sit down and really crack open an innovative conversation, that's not happening with your ChatGPT. That's happening with your teammates, with your communication skills, with your engagement with others. Like those things I hate saying they're not soft skills to me, they're critical skills. And that, to me, again, is the complementary fact to AI when you're looking at moving forward to thrive with AI and not just survive the storm.
And I think
absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Meredith.
Oh, I was just going to add, absolutely. It's funny. I do a presentation actually on emotional intelligence in the legal profession and how absolutely crucial it is. And I like to say, when it comes down to it, we are all just humans working with humans, right? And we have different tools that we use, and we have policies and procedures and technology, but ultimately we're all humans working with humans. And I think a lot of the sort of reticence and resistance to AI does come from a very sort of emotional place, as opposed to a purely rational place. And I think EQ is so important, and it's about really sort of understanding your own emotions and the emotions of those around you, and finding kind of the best way to kind of manage and modulate and channel your own sort of emotions in a positive way, and also sort of understand and empathize with and really connect with the other humans you're working with by understanding sort of their emotional state. And I think, a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of kind of reaching out to your skeptics, bringing along your users, conducting focus groups, asking questions, really all goes to, I think, that sort of human to human connection of, listen, we want to bring in these tools to make your lives better, to make our lives, but to make everybody's work easier and more efficient, and to really sort of understand and acknowledge some of those emotions, that anxiety, that fear, that confusion, that distrust of this new technology, and really kind of connect human to human and listen and hear and bring into your project plan efforts to really address those emotional concerns. I think that's very valid and really important. And I think if we all operate under sort of this, false assumption that all humans operate completely rationally, and if you just sort of sell someone on all of the rational benefits and, operational reasons why this tool is great, that's going to work, I think we're fooling ourselves, right? People are human. We are emotional. We have emotional responses to things, and you need to really empathize. You need to really connect and understand sort of what the people around you are feeling, not just thinking, but feeling sort of around this tool, and make sure that not only you're hearing them, but you're making sure that they feel heard, right? And those are, I think, two sort of separate things, and they are both important. You can't just kind of give the impression that they're being heard, but not really hear them. And you also can't just hear them, but not make sure that they feel heard. You really need to do both of those things.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And, that actually relates to the point I wanted to make too, which is this is going to lead to us needing to train people differently. And we should really be thinking about that now because, those of us that came up through the ranks doing those first drafts and doing those rote tasks, they weren't meaningless. They may have been boring, but they did teach you a lot. And a lot of how I, as a CMO, have taught my teams is to have them do a first draft and then work through together what needs to change. So that team member can still produce a first draft using generative AI, but they're not going to have the same level of ownership and engagement with that text as if they wrote it. So that doesn't make it a bad thing, but it does make it a different thing. And I think we're going to have to be very intentional about whether it's associates or it's marketing folks or it's business leaders, how we are making sure that people are getting that training, that feedback, that access to a space where they can experiment and get feedback from more experienced leaders. And we need to do that in a way that's mindful of the different ways our brains interact when we're just getting something spit out to us versus writing it from scratch.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because I was just thinking earlier today about sort of some of the different experiences that I think junior attorneys have now versus sort of what my time was like, coming up I started my career in a couple of big New York law firms. And I feel like I spent a lot of time sort of standing in a partner's office, peering over their shoulder at their screen as they were typing something or as they were editing something. Now obviously with better technology and with more sort of remote work opportunities, what I tend to do when I work with a more junior attorney is, I will sort of have a video call going on, and we'll work in a shared document, and I'll kind of be typing something and they'll be watching along on their screen. And it did occur to me, actually, I thought, I think they've got a much better view of the screen than I did, kind of standing over somebody's shoulder, trying to see what was on their desk. They can actually sit at their own desk and have it, on their screen in front of them. But it's a similar concept. It's just a different execution. And again, I think that goes back to, fundamentally, we're looking at people, process, and tools, right? And do you have the right people? Do you have the right processes? And do you have the right tools? And as the tools change, we can kind of evaluate, all right, what are our best practices? What are our processes? I don't think that necessarily the tool should dictate the process. I think ideally it's more the process should dictate the tool, right? You decide, do you have the right people? Do you have the right processes in place? And then what tools can you implement to kind of improve those processes and better enable those people? But that is something I was just thinking about, how I do wonder if any junior associates now ever have to sort of stand in somebody's office and peer over someone's shoulder, or if it's all screen sharing the way I tend to work with more junior members of my team now.
Kalia, we're at 47 past. I know we were trying to wrap at some point. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, we certainly can. And we can also open it up to the audience. If anybody would like to, chime in or ask a question, you can feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. I think that would be great. Do you have another question you'd like to pose?
I'm going to go one more. This is a fun question. I'm going to start with Rich, and then of course, Meredith, Lisa, if you want to jump in too, that's fantastic. We're talking a lot about efficiency and giving people, more time back in their busy days and productivity and such. And Rich, I know there are many applications that are out there allowing people to become more productive and efficient in their everyday life, in their jobs. Which applications, Rich, are you using today, and which would you recommend?
Yeah, there are three that I go to all the time, and I'll be the first to admit I was a major skeptic. Speaking of skeptics, of ChatGPT when it first came around, because I write a lot of content. I'm very much in my. It hurt me in my feels when I heard that people were going to start just throwing their thought leadership to technology. What I will say is that I've come around, but I've come around in a halfway sense that I will use ChatGPT to kind of spur and stir up some ideas. So if I'm writing and Meredith, I made a note here on emotional intelligence because I'm passionate about that topic too, especially in the legal space. I'll go and throw out like, what are some benefits of emotional intelligence for attorneys, or what are some ideas on these content pieces? And I'll ask for a ton of them, and I'll let something jump off the screen at me. And then I'm not that person that says, okay, you write the article for me, and then I copy and paste it onto LinkedIn and put my couple of hashtags in there and I call it a day. You got to put some effort into it. And I write way too conversational for anybody to see my thing and be like, that doesn't sound like him. So I will swear by ChatGPT for the idea generation capabilities for thought leadership, 100%, for videos, blogs, whatever. I'm a big fan of Monday.com. That is one that has, because shocker, I like pretty colors and designs and things like that based on my coat selection. If you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see the red one. But I like Monday.com because it's very efficient, especially for team project management and delegating tasks and seeing the progress on things. So there are lots of project management software out there. That's my personal preference. And then finally, Canva. Oh my God, if Canva ever disappeared, I would be screwed. Talk about like a phone book and a blank piece of paper. I have tons of ideas of what I want something to look like, but if you put a blank piece of paper or a blank digital piece of paper in front of me, I'm just going to sit there and stare at it for a while. And AI, even in that, when you're writing proposals or you're writing content, you can use AI in Canva to help you. I'm not going to say I'm waxing Shakespeare poetic every single time I'm writing something, but AI and Canva will help me clean some things up too. So those are my three non-negotiables. Got to have them. And Spotify, because I'm a music freak.
Kaylee, I heard you. I saw you raising the roof when Rich
Canva.
mentioned Canva.
Canva, what's up, Canva? And even before that, I really like Dolly. It's this way that you can describe an image that you'd like to be created. It's a fantastic, I mean, it's just fun. It was like just the most amazing thing. I would describe my daughter sitting on top of the world, holding a lollipop, and she'd be with me, and it was fanciful. But Canva is practical, man. And now Canva has image generation in it too. So I'm totally on board with Canva.
Well, I think we can wrap. This was great. At the end, hearing about some impactful applications, including Canva, but talking a lot about investing in technology and just hearing some of the horror stories and the scary stuff within corporate legal departments and law firms. Don't be scared of Gen AI. Embrace it, I think, is maybe what I heard from the panelists. I want to thank everybody. I'll pass it back to you, Kaylee, but I want to thank everybody. Our panelists, absolutely. Thank you. Everyone out there that attended. We really appreciate you spending, an hour with us on a Tuesday. And with all that, I know Kaylee put some information into chat. We certainly will be at LMA in San Diego in early April. We'll be at Clock in May, and we're going to continue to have these conversations where we're thrilled about helping firms, helping corporate legal departments when it comes to technology. And we really appreciate you all joining today. Kaylee, back to you.
I mean, you covered it, Mike. This was a fantastic conversation. Rich, Meredith, Lisa, thank you so much for dropping your insights here. I feel like my brain is completely full, and it's, we live in a world where all this new technology is flying around at us so fast, but you're really driving home the point that humans are first. We need to keep our eye on our soft skills, AKA critical skills, AKA emotional intelligence. And we need to keep our eye on change management because it's different for everybody. Things are changing. They will always change. And conversations like this make the uncertainty that we feel okay. And we're going to move through it together. And it's going to be better. We're not going to do some of that stuff that we all did it in our younger former selves. Like Mike said, we will absolutely be at the LMA show in San Diego. That is at the beginning of April. We will be at Clock in Las Vegas at the beginning of May. We would love to set up meetings with anybody who's listening or watching this later online. So you can reach us at hello@hike2.com to find us there. We've got a bunch more great events coming up. You can visit us at hike2.com to find us there. And then finally, we have a YouTube channel, and I've dropped a link there for the recording of this event and other great things. Thank you for sharing your LinkedIn channels. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and I wish you all a wonderful day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.